in the interest of speed, I'm going to get started. My role today is just to do the Q&A moderation. I want to please ask all of you to put your questions in the Q&A folder. We already have over 50 questions that have been received on email. We're going to try and get through as many questions as possible. I cannot deal with specifics, so try and generalize your question as much as possible. If the question has already been answered, I'm not going to ask the question again. We will record the session and you will have access after the fact to have a look at it. I know that you are all deeply frustrated. We will try and get through as many questions as possible, but please keep your questions general and throw them in the Q&A. I won't be able to monitor both the chat and the Q&A. The Q&A folder is where I need your questions, please. Chief, I'm handing over to you. Off you go.
Thank you, Natalia, and good afternoon, everyone. And I hope we're all doing okay under the circumstances. And today we aim to deal with the issues around UIF. We have invited Alan, who we work with at UIF, to pretty much deal with the questions that everyone has been struggling with, and those questions needs to be answered, and to ensure that we get some level of satisfaction as the time goes. I'm just trying to get Alan back in. I think he was kicked out a little bit, so just give us a minute or so, and then we'll get Alan back in. He was just kicked out a little bit. Just hang on 1 second.
1 sec, he's coming back. Don't worry. I see we've also got Audrey on. And please, if you've got any questions, please feel free to add them into the Q&A folder. I can't deal with specifics, so please try and keep your questions as general as possible so that we can answer the question for as many people as possible. So please try and generalize your question as much as possible and listen with intent to see if your question has been responded to. We are recording the session and we will release the recording as well as provide an FAQ after the fact so that you've got it. Please feel free to add any questions you've got to the Q&A folder. And I am very sorry if I don't get through all of them. As I say, the volume of questions that we have already received are very high. So we'll do our best to respond to as many of them as possible. Please add them to the Q&A. And I can see we've already got 15 questions in. Are you ready to take questions?
Absolutely. You can go ahead.
Okay, well, I suppose the biggest question that I have received in the last 24 hours is delays. A lot of people saying that they have submitted, they have been waiting since March, they want to understand what the delays are, why is it taking so long? Can you give us an understanding of where you actually are in the process and what the potential issues could be for those delays?
Yes, you got to take into account now you're looking at 10 payment periods. The payment period started from 27 March. You're looking at up to phase 2, 15th of March, and then phase 3 from 16th of March to 25 July. So with 10 iteration periods, this means that we have to do 10 payments almost weekly. So in terms of what is taking place at the moment, the new applications are being processed. And in addition to that, the previous month's iteration periods are being reprocessed. Now, let me give you an example of being reprocessing. If, for example, if your claim was rejected and rejected for a reason, and that reason was corrected by yourself or by us as a department, it will be reprocessed. A typical example is if your employer was not declared or your employees was not declared, now you go to U-filing or you go to EDECT or you go to the digital declaration and you declare that individual, then that will be reprocessed. Now that's been taking place on the regular basis. So therefore, there is a gap between an iteration period to iteration period. For example, if we process April this week, it may be in the next 7 days, we're going to process April again. If you process October, that is from 16 September to 15th October. Now, if that is processed today, it will be a week later until you process the next payment for that iteration period. Now, we are processing payments every day, but we're not processing payments per the same iteration period. It's being repeated or it's been in terms of a sequential or chronological order. So you got to find out in terms of what period is being processed and when that period will, the next date of that processing will be. So in terms of clarifying that for those that are listening in and going forward, what we're going to try to do, we're going to put out a schedule to indicate which payment iteration will run on which dates, and that will give you an idea in terms of, yes, I'm waiting for that month. That month will only run next week, Wednesday. Therefore, I have to check the system maybe Thursday or Friday. So that is a little bit of complication that is taking place because you have different iteration period and you don't know when that run of that particular period is taking place. I hope I try to cover myself properly, but any follow-ups, I can take it from there. Now, the second part of it,
yeah, carry on.
Continue. Yeah, the second part of it is in terms of the new iteration period. The new iteration period, you're looking from 16th October, from 16th March to 25 July. Now, you're looking at three parts to that new direction. Direction covers Annexure A, covers Annexure B, and cover the comorbidities. Now, what has been released to date is Annexure B. Those company that listened to Annexure B, the portal was opened on the 19th of July, and we received application last week, and those payments will be processed by end of this week. Now, what is outstanding is Annexure A and the comorbidities from 16th March to 25 July. But what we're going to do before the end of the week, we're going to allow Annexure A companies to lodge claims within Annexure B period, which is 28 June to 25 July, only for that period. And then when the portal is reopened for Annexure A, then all they have to do is to submit a claim for 16 March to 25 June. Now, let me stop there. So maybe there's any clarity or any follow-up questions I can take on that part of it.
Alan, I think, the problem is it's great to have you on the webinar and for us to have you for an hour and 20 minutes. I'm not shooting the messenger, but all of this information that's sitting in your head doesn't reach the tourism industry. So we've got people who are complaining that they can't reach you on the toll-free number, that they can't reach on the emails that have been given to them. There is a fundamental problem with the communication. How do we reach the UIF to ask for the information that you're just giving us now, so that we don't have to wait 3 months to get that information from you, essentially? Well, how can we improve this communication?
Yes, I think that is a subject matter which was posed to us, not only by yourself, but by other establishment and also through the NEDLEC process. Now, what we're trying to do is to look at a case management process. A case management process in terms of the call center, logging of calls at the call center, back into the environment meaning the UIF environment, resolving those cases and giving proper feedback to the clients via the call center or directly to the call center. And also in terms of improving our communication via the different social platform, be it WhatsApp, be it the social media, or be it in terms of our regular platform that is hosted by Department of Employment and Labor. In addition to that, what we try to do and what I try to do is to hold as much webinars as possible. Now, since the new direction was released and the new direction was signed on the 15th of July, from the 19th of July, this is my third webinar that I have, and I also plan to have more going forward. I think tomorrow there's a webinar that will take place with the South African Institute of Chartered Accountants. So that is the means of getting the information out there. Now, in addition to that, and one of my biggest problems is that we try to keep in touch with all employers. Now, our means of communicating to all employees is via the email address that the employer has lodged a claim, whether it's March, whether it's May, whether it's September, or whether it's this calendar year or this financial year. But what has happened, and what is the problem of the miscommunication? When the employer, through the representative, lodged an application in early March, April for the first iteration period, they gave us one email address. Now, subsequent from that, the consultant to the employer has changed, but the contact details of the employer is still on our TERS portal or TERS database. So when we're sending out communication, it's not reaching the rightful person because the personal details within our TERS system is outdated. So most employers do not receive our communication. Now, if you look at our communication modes, our first and primary mode is to contact the employer directly via the TAS portal. Now, I sent out a letter last week, Sunday, on the 18th of July, explaining them the process going forward from the 19th of July. A majority of those employers did not receive those letters. Reason? The email address is outdated on the TAS portal. So no one is changing or no one is updating the personal details.
Alan, sorry, just to interject there. I think the problem is not so much that, but the problem is that we're not able to reach UIF TERS. We're not able, the telephone numbers aren't working, the email address is not working, and these are people who have questions. So I'll leave it at that, but I just want to highlight the fact that this is a big pain point for the industry, that the call center number and the email address is not responded to. And most of the questions that I've received in the last 24 hours have been that they've asked for follow-up and nobody's getting back to them. So I would like to just plant that seed with you, and let's just try and run through as many questions as we can. We've got over 200 questions that have come through. Sorry to interject, but we have to get to it. So, you know, a question around, we cannot apply from March onwards without having the October to December payment. If people haven't been paid out for October to December, how can they start applying for March's UIF TERS?
They can still apply, nothing's stopping them. And nothing stopping them from the previous iteration period as well. So the processes did not change. We kept the processes as is, not to confuse employers by having wholesale changes. There were slight changes, which I will talk about in terms of the new direction, but the process is the same. You go onto the online portal. If you're the first time if you're applying for the first time, there's certain mandatory documents that you will attach. If you're applying at a second time, or in terms of repeating the claims, there are certain documentation you attach and certain documentation you don't attach. Now, one of the documentation we ask employers to attach is proof of payment. If you did not receive your payment as yet, all you got to do on the letterhead of the company indicate, I lodged my claim on that date, but to date I received no payment. And you attach that as your PDF documentation, and the system will take your application. The system will not deny you your application or not prevent you from applying. So that is the process that you followed, whether you received or did not receive. The system is not designed to reject claims on the basis that you did not receive payment for a prior iteration period.
Okay, can you tell me what the expected turnaround time for an appeal regarding sector classification is? How long do people have to wait?
Okay, now in terms of the current status, as per Monday morning, we only had 220 appeals that was in our inbox that came until or up to Friday, the 23rd, 24th of July, and that will be processed this week. So in terms of whatever we receive, we process it within 7 working days. However, if we do not receive the appeal, then we cannot process it. Now, there is some kind of disjointment between the employer and the call center agent. A link is given. Maybe the employer is not receiving the link, or maybe when the documentation is downloaded, there is no documentation in terms of being downloaded by the employer. It could be for those reasons. But whatever is in our inbox, as per Monday morning, that will be finalized by the coming Sunday. So we are taking 7 days. The only thing I can confirm is what we receive in our inbox, not what is assumed to be received. And that's where the problem is. There's no confirmation.
Alan, because if it's only 220 appeals that you receive, must all come from tourism because they all land up in my inbox. So is there a possibility, do you think, that the appeals are not being lodged in the right place? Because I can tell you right now, I've certainly seen more than 220 people come through to me and say, I'm sorry, I've launched an appeal. I've been phoning, I've been trying to get this information. It can't just be 220. I'm sorry, that just doesn't make sense to me. Is there a possibility that we are using the wrong address? What is that appeal process? Please take us through it.
Okay, in terms of the appeal process, you got to phone the call center. Now, the reason for phoning the call center is that all appeals are logged and documented, or there's some kind of monitoring mechanism against the appeal that is lodged. So if you do not lodge your appeal via the call center, it will not be attended to. So first thing you phoned in, there's a prompt. It will indicate to you in terms of which button to press. Once you get to the call center agent will ask a few security questions, a few mandatory questions, and then forward you the link. Once you receive the link, then you download your appeal documentation It is logged to the call center and is forwarded to a dedicated inbox. Once we receive it in the dedicated inbox, it's divided to the dedicated staff. There's 7 staff that are dealing with appeals. So we receive appeals on a weekly basis. Once we receive those appeals in the inboxes, we divide it on a weekly basis, and we allow the 7 individuals to finalize that within 7 working days or 7 calendar days. And then in the following week, we monitor what is outstanding and we do a new division. To date, from the time the appeal process started, which was on the 6th of April, we finalized or processed 2,500. When I indicate the 200 odd that we received, that's what we received on a weekly basis. Now, if your appeals are not being received by the call center, then your appeals will not be attended to. It has to follow the procedure because that is what was documented and that's what we ensure in terms of finalization from the inbox to the staff, and the staff process it, then you go to ICT, then the employers are informed in terms of an email process, and thereafter the employer comes back onto the online portal and lodge a claim again. Over to you, Natalie.
Your call center saying that they have technical issues and this is why they have not made payments from December onwards. How is this being resolved? Because it's quite clear from what I can see in the chat and in the Q&A that the process that you've put in place is a great process, but practically it's not working, essentially. Your call center is not empowered to give the right answers, or they just don't respond. So are there technical issues with the TERS call center, and can you advise when this will be fixed and what the call center number is, please?
Okay, the call center number did not change from the old call center service provider to the new call center service provider. It's the same. Now, in terms of the call center, it is a private company that came through the tender process and won the tender. So you're looking at a company or establishment that is have the capabilities and the skills in terms of operating a call center environment. Is we did not start the call center from scratch, or we did not put a call center in place, particularly for the task process. We went out on a tender, and from the tender process, we appointed a company that is competent in the call center environment. However, having said that, if you or the members out there or the public out there indicate there are technical issues, then the technical issues got to be reviewed. What is the problem? Because we cannot on face value say every problem lies with the call center. We have to find the root cause of the problem. And once we determine the root cause of the problems, then we can put in a solution into that process to make it more streamlined and more effective. Now that process has started. As you know, attached to the task process is GTEC. GTEC is a government advisory institution or entity that assisting us through the process to ensure there's effectiveness and efficiency in terms of processing task claim, be it appeals or be it a normal claim. Now we have engaged the coordinator of the call center to do a review of the process, and the person that is in charge or mandated to do the review process will report back to us in terms of any technical issue as you indicated. And if you find there's issues lying with the call center, we will rectify that. If you feel that the employers out there are doing something that they're not supposed to do, then we will send out a communication. And also we got to look at our internal process in terms of receiving those cases, turning over the cases and giving a satisfactory response to those that are lodged the process. So we are looking at that at the moment, and hopefully by end of the week, we'll have some kind of solutions. So once again, I'm saying, the call center agent or the call center company that's managing our call center process is an established company in the call center environment. They're competent. We just got to find out what is the cause or what is the issues related to that and try to find some kind of solutions. Over to you.
Thanks. Okay, so I'm going to get into questions. Milan wants to know, staff from the same company, some got paid TERS, others are still pending 6 months later. Why? Why are some staff getting their TERS and others not, and they have exactly the same scenario?
No, it's very simple. It's very simple. Every application that's been received or every claim that is received from an employer that contains 1, 50 or 100 employees are processed. If a payment is made, you will find it in the payment breakdown. If a payment is not made, you find it in the pending breakdown or the rejected breakdown. And every pending or every rejection has a reason for it. It will tell you why we are not paying. Do not compare individual to individual. Each employee is subjected to the business process or the business rules. At the end of the business rules, it gives you a positive or negative answer. So there is an error message. You might not agree with it. Then if you don't agree with the error message, then we can give you clarity on the error message that is attached to every individual. So we don't look at it globally. We look at it employee per employee. One employee's error message might be different for another employer. Now, you got to understand what the error message means and what is the solution to that error message. And once the solution is activated, they need to be reprocessed for payment. If you give me an error message, then I can tell you what the error message is, and in terms of explanation or description, and then I can advise you what the solution is to overcome that error or rejection code.
I think that would be a very good exercise to do, Alan, for your team, because a lot of the questions are around error messages and what they mean. And if all we had was a table with the error message and what it means and how to fix it, I think that would go a long way to assisting some of the people's main points. A question we get a lot, and that is around submission for local and foreign employees. They've received the payment for the local employees, but not for foreign employees, even though those foreign employees have contributed tax, UIF, all of those good things. What is the difference between local and foreign employees, and why would the one be sorted and not the other?
Yes, as I said, with every rejection, there's a rejection message, description, and solution. Now, before I go to that, the description of the error message and the solution were emailed to every employer via the contact details as per the TERS portal. If we did not receive it, then your details, your contact details is incorrect and wasn't updated. Now, let me come back to your question in terms of the South African citizen and a non-South African citizen, as we call it, the foreign nationals. You got to take into account after the first 3 months of TERS, that the first 3 months I'm talking about is March, April, May, and June. We were audited. And with that audit process were certain recommendations which we had to implement. And one of the recommendations is strengthen your verification process, because what you see from an employer is this data. Data in terms of ID number, data in terms of surname, data in terms of first names or initials, or whatever other data that you add to insert into the claim form. That's all you see. You see data. Now, the data or the information is processed and verified. Now, with the South African citizen, we do a number of verification. One, we check against FIRS whether the number is valid. Two, whether the person is a warm body. Why warm body? Because in the last audit process, we were the recommendation was, or the findings from the AG, we paid to certain number of clients that were deceased. So we undergo that verification process. Two, we check with FIRS is one check. The second check is SARS, South African Revenue Services, whether that employee is attached to that employer. Now, how do we check with SARS? We check against your pay-as-you-earn number. Whatever number you give us, that number must contain the employees attached to that pay-as-you-earn number. If you give us a wrong pay-as-you-earn number, you will get a wrong result. If the employee is not attached to that pay-as-you-earn number, then you will get a negative results. Now, with the foreign nationals, it follows the same process. We check with FIRS because every foreign national should have a work permit. Every foreign national should have asylum seeker certificate. So it should be some records with FIRS. If there's no records with FIRS, then the administrative process to employ that foreign nationals is lacking in some way or another. I'm not saying it's illegal, I'm saying it's lacking. The second part of it, if you pay taxation, pay as you earn for that foreign nationals, you must find it on FIRS. Now, that foreign national number will be attached to the pay as you earn number. The pay as you earn number will be attached to the foreign nationals. So when we send our data to a foreign source, I'm not talking about foreign source, I'm talking about outside UIF, then we match or we ask for a verification. If it's positive, we pay. If it's negative, we don't pay. Negative means we cannot obtain a verification. And that is why you have non-payment, because what we see is data. We don't see the physical person, the warm body. And also in terms of the warm body, as I said, it has to go through certain verification to ensure it meets the business rules, and then we pay out. Over to you, Natalie. And Natalia.
That's all good. What documents are required when asked for proof of business for 6 months?
There's no documentation to ask for business of 6 months. Now, if you're looking at the only time we ask for supporting documentation, as you mentioned, is the appeal process. Now, once again, when you put in your zip codes with South African Revenue Services, you are giving your zip codes, right? So that means information that is given by the employer to the various government institutions cannot be validated, cannot be verified, cannot be confirmed. That is why we had problems with zip codes, and that is why we went to the verification or the appeal process. We're asking you, yes, your zip codes that attach to the business establishment does not meet the industrial sector verification or industrial codes. So attach proof to indicate that business belongs in that sector, be it tourism, be it hospitality. So all we ask for is proof of registration. We ask company profile. We ask proof of receipts or invoices to indicate that activities has taken place and that activities is linked to one of the 3 major sectors that we allowed for the phase 2 and which we are allowing for in terms of phase 3. If you provide that through your appeal process, then it gives us the comfort that your establishment equals to annexures or equal to the 3 sectors that allowed for in terms of extension: the tourism, the hospitality, and the liquor part of it. Over to you.
Tourism, hospitality, and liquor. Does that include events? Does that include travel agents?
If you look at the last iteration, I'm talking about 16th of October to 31st December and 1st of January to 15th of March. And if you look at the establishment that were under the direction that was issued to the 2 period, you will see venues hosting auctions, venue hosting professional sports, venues where social events are held, and that's all events. If you look at the new direction that covers from 16 March to 25 July, and is divided into 2 portions, Annexure A and Annexure B, events is under Annexure A.
Natalia?
Yes, Chief.
Alan, on the last part of this annexures, it talks about those that are involved within the value chain of that particular industry, correct? I would assume that those...
Correct, absolutely correct.
And when we put that in those directives, it means that anyone who's involved who may not be mentioned by name, provided they're involved along the value chain of either events or tourism or travel or anything that has to do with that, will fall under that generalization, including the travel agents that are involved in events and so forth and so on.
Absolutely, absolutely. Let me give you an example that will make the explanation easier to understand. Now, a cleaning company, right? You might have a cleaning company that is attached to an hotel chain. We do not accept cleaning companies across the floor because we're not sure in terms of which sector that cleaning company belongs to. But if you have a cleaning company that's attached to a hotel chain, because normally those services are outsourced, then through the appeal process, you can say, yes, I'm a cleaning company. I'm attached to, for example, Sutton Sons, and here's my proof of contract with Sutton Sons. My main core responsibility to ensure the cleaning in terms of those hotel groups. And here's a contract, and here's a proof of your invoices, and this is my company profile and my proof of registration. Then we can say, yes, that is a value added end-to-end processes. Therefore, within that hospitality, then you are allowed. So when you submit your appeal process, you must motivate your establishment is linked to either tourism, linked to hospitality, or linked to the hotel. The liquor. The same thing as you mentioned in terms of travel agents. Yes, travel agents are linked to tourism, but the codes might not be accepted through the normal process. Therefore, the codes or the motivation will be accepted via the appeal process. All they got to do is to prove to us that they are a travel company, and the only way we can do it, not by physical inspection, by documentation produced. But the key thing is lodging your appeal to the call center, attaching the pro forma, the supporting documentation. It's come to the 7 dedicated staff that deals with appeal, the processing of those appeals, and then the information that goes to you says approved, please resubmit your claim or submit your claim. You're absolutely correct.
Sure. Okay. So, Alan, 2 questions. Question number 1, what about staff who were retrenched but working during the period in which they could claim for UIF TERS? Can that be done? Can that be done retroactively? And what about staff who are on reduced work time? Can a company also claim on behalf of the staff member that had reduced work time? So guys that were retrenched now, but were working at the time, say October through to March, and staff who were on reduced work time, how does that impact?
Okay, let me put it this way. In terms of employees that can apply, those employees must be attached to those establishment under Annexure A or B for the current iteration. Current iteration, I'm talking about 16 March to 25 July. Yes, they can. In terms of, and that is the main intention, the main purposes. The TERS will compensate for loss of income. Now, if you're on reduced work time, that means loss of income. So you will apply through the process, complete the necessary information, and one of the columns said, remuneration earned during the lockdown, what amount you receive. All that was explained in the communication letter that went out to employers, because we explained in terms of key information in that letter. And if you look at it, one of the key paragraphs was remuneration earned during lockdown period. It's not 100% of your salary. It was part of the salary because you work for 2 weeks of the month. You do not work for the other 2 weeks. Yes. Now, that is the first part of it. You're still in employment. The difference between TERS and the statutory claims is the statutory claims you are terminated, but in terms of the TERS one, you're still in employment, but you're experiencing a loss of income. Now, if a person is terminated, that means a company cannot apply for him from date of termination going forward. However, if there's a period in terms of which a person was in employment and the person experienced a loss of income, then the company can apply because he's applying for a period in which the person was in employment, and the same principle applies. However, you got to take into account that we do verification against our database, and we only look for those still in employment. There could be a possibility there's a termination date in declaration period of the person, which the system might reject, and that those cases we have to deal with it as exceptions. When you set business rules, you cannot set business rules for every scenario out there. You're setting a business rule that can cover 90, 95% or 98% of the situation. There could be 1% or 2% that we have to have an exceptional rule that you deal case by case, looking at the evidence and making a decision. So the key thing going forward, everything is controlled by business rules, everything is controlled by verification. For the exceptional cases, we do have to deal with it individually and make a decision based on individual case or on individual circumstances.
Can I ask you about sole proprietors? I've had quite a few people who have said, I'm a sole proprietor. Can I claim I'm a director? Can I claim, or do I have to be the employee of a company?
It's very simple. TERS is for employees and not for employer. The same principle, and you're looking at is governed by the Unemployment Insurance Act. Who is deemed to be an employee? If you're deemed to be an employee of that establishment, then you're free to apply. The only difference between the statutory and the TERS one is that with the unemployment insurance, there's individual claims, but with TERS, there's bulk claims. Bulk claims that can be made by the employer for his employees. So the key thing is the definition of employee did not change from the UI Act to TERS. The same principle applies.
Can you tell me about this Annexure A and Annexure B? We've got somebody who's a travel agent very concerned that she falls into Annexure B, can only claim from the 28th of June to the 25th of July. What happens to the March to June period? Tell me about this.
Okay. Now, in terms of the last direction that was signed on the 15th of July, it covers three portions. It covers portion in terms of the vulnerable workers. Vulnerable workers are looking at age, you're looking at comorbidities, you're looking at isolation quarantine. And that is for the entire period 16 March to 25 July. With establishments, you're looking at two parts. And that was taken into account by making reference to the COCTA regulations. Our company is affected by the COCTA regulations, and that was aligned to the period in which they claim. Now, if you look at the COCTA regulations, the events were affected in a term over a longer period and continuously. Therefore, with the events, it was granted that they could apply from 16 March to 25 July. If you look at restaurants, if you look at liquor, they were greatly affected more. Every establishment were affected by lockdown, but they at the more advanced stage from the 28th of June in terms of the last level 4 lockdown, where they had to close the businesses, and also in terms of liquor, there was no on-site or off-site sales or consumption. So therefore, for those establishments is from 28 June to 25 July. However, having said that, what we're trying to do in terms of not to penalize Annexure A company, from end of this week, we will send out a communication where Annexure A companies can apply for 28 June to 25 July as one portion of the bigger payment. And thereafter, when the earlier periods is open, then those events can make a second claim or a further claim from 16 March to 27 June. I hope that answered your question. Over to you.
How do you know where you fall, Annexure A or Annexure B? How would you find out?
Yeah,
because it's there in the directive.
Let me just come in a little bit just to explain a few things. So Annexure A or Annexure B, on Annexure A, it talks about venues, and it says on the bottom, anyone that's involved in the value chain of whether you are involved in events, conferencing, whatever it may be, or you're linked to a hotel, you were a shuttle company that used to, take people, to those events, or you were a bus company, or you were a travel agent that's involved in events. If you are in any way involved in the events along the value chain, you qualify to apply for Annexure A as well as Annexure B. You just have to prove that you are indeed involved in the events or conferencing, or you're attached to this venue, and so forth and so on. So in other words, the fact that it's not mentioned that this company, or you're a travel agent, or you're a bus company, it doesn't mean that you're disqualified. It just means you have to go on the bottom. If you believe that you are within that value chain, you are allowed to apply. If you're a tour operator, as an example, and you're a professional meeting organizer and you put together meetings, you're supposed to be able to claim that. So let's look at it in that way. It's not going to say a coach company, it's not going to say this, it's not going to say that. That's why there's that on the bottom of Annexure A that says, if you are within the value chain and you believe you are, please go ahead and apply. Thank you.
Thanks, Chief.
Absolutely right. Absolutely right. And therefore, yeah, absolutely right in terms of what was said. And therefore, we have the appeal process. You attach your documentation to prove that you link to that events establishments. And with that appeal and with that motivation and with that supporting documentation, if it's accepted, then we will send out a communication to you, and thereafter you can come and lodge your appeal. But you must give us adequate or relevant supporting documentation to prove your point. If not, your appeal will be rejected. Over to you.
Okay, lots of questions around error codes. I'm not going to go through these error codes because I think it would be better dealt with if we had a table. So Alan, you need to give me a human being on your side who I can speak to unpack all these error messages, please, because a lot of the questions are around that. Okay. A lot of questions around when we're going to receive TERS payments. I don't think Alan can respond to that. He's given us a commitment at the beginning that it was going to take 7 days. The proof is in the pudding, so we will see how that works out. Processing too slow, small batches are being processed. Can we not get the specific days scheduled for each period to be processed? Is that a possibility, Alan?
Yes, I think I mentioned that in the earlier responses. So all we got to do is to put out a schedule so the employers or clients out there know which iteration is being processed on which day, and 2 or 3 days later, then they can check the portal for any processing or payments made. Because you got to take into account there's a number of iteration periods that is attached to TERS, and you cannot do everything in 1 day or 1 week. So it follows a strict schedule, and therefore you have a period of time where that month or that period is not repeated, and maybe repeated 7 or 10 days later.
What happens if employees
Over to you.
from one company within the group are transferred to another company in the group during the lockdown? Does this impact on their TERS payout or status? So they're part of a group, they've been transferred from one company within the group to another company within the group. Does this impact at all on the TERS status or payout?
Yes, it could. It could. One has to look at physical examples in terms to make that comparison and conclusion. But in terms of the general answer, this is how the verification works. When you lodge a claim, you put in your company's reference number. Declarations is attached to the company's reference number. When we do the verification, we look for that employee that is linked to that employer. And if you cannot find the link, then it's not verified. Then the declaration is an issue. So therefore, when you lodge a claim, you must ask yourself, that employee, under which number or which company was he declared? And if he was declared under that number or that company, then the claim should come under that number or company. The key thing is the verification tries or gives us an indication that person is still in that employment of that employer, and we have proof of it. And the person is not terminated, therefore, TERS is applicable. So verification is key, and that's how verification works. Employer against employee's number. And if you cannot find a match, then the application is declined.
On the manual capture option of employee details, the system does not allow you to change the payment medium to pay to employee. On the drop-down box, it only has the pay to employer option. Does the banking details below that relate to the employee's banking details, even though you cannot select pay to employee?
Okay. When you come to that portion, there's 2 questions. Did you give an advance or you did not give an advance? If you say no, automatically in the back end, it is defaulted to 1. So you don't have to change it in the online portal. It is defaulted to 1. But we're trying, because as I said, we do get responses from clients, and that is maybe causing a confusion to clients. They're not sure that in the back end is changed to 1. So we're trying to rectify that in the front end to give a better picture to the employer. But you don't have to change to 1. It's done automatically for you. It is defaulted to 1. However, if you gave an advance, then we pay to employer, and then you have to attach proof that you pay to employer. Now, your proof is same as your proof of payment. How did you pay your TERS money over to your clients? In the same vein, you paid your advances to your employees. So some kind of electronic confirmation or documentation to show that advances were given. The only time we pay to employer if the employer proves advance was given. Now, if you are no advances given, automatically it changed to pay to employee. Therefore, when you're capturing it, direct capturing, make sure you have the correct banking details of the employee. If you're submitting a CSV file, make sure the banking details are correct of that employee. The banking details of employees will be subjected to verification. If it's correct, payment will go through. If it's incorrect, then that payment for that employee will be rejected. Over to you.
Okay, I am unable to verify my bank account with UIF. I have sent them 3 valid bank letters, but they failed to verify the account and have not paid since May 2020.
Okay, the first thing you ask yourself is the bank verification for the employer or for the employee. Now, within the call center environment, you did mention there is problems in terms of contacting the call center, in terms of hiccups or blockages, and that we will look into it and try to rectify it before the end of the week. But normally, what happens in terms of bank verification, in terms of assistance, we have dedicated personnel in the call center environment that receive calls attached to bank verification. Security questions are asked. If you pass the security questions, then the call center agent will assist you to correct what's in the front-end portal together with the brand new or recent bank confirmation letter. Once that is cleared, then a request is sent to ICT to mark it verified. And once that is verified, then the processing takes place. When you go into the front-end portal, it gives you an indication where your bank verification is successful or failed. If it's failed, that means you got to contact the call center. There are agents stationed there or dedicated to the bank verification process, and they will assist in terms of moving from a failed to a successful bank verification. Over to you.
SARS has not updated our UIF payments to the UIF. So our TERS payment has been stopped because they say our UIF contributions have not been paid. Apparently, we are not the only one. What can be done to get SARS to update UIF payments?
Well, we did have a meeting with SARS, and I think their records are up to date. I think it's one of the few government entity that we can place reliance on in terms of correctness of information and processes that are to the T. Now, the key thing is in terms of contribution checks are checked against an individual, the employee's ID number against the pay-as-you-earn number. And we're checking from March 2020 backwards. We're not checking from 1st of April forward, because reason being is that most companies or most employers were on lockdown. So you're having nil returns, or the person did not work or worked partially. So therefore, contribution checks is not being done during the current lockdown period. It's been checked from March 31st March 2020 backwards. So that is the period that we're looking at. So it's not that is being updated or not updated now. It is for the period that elapsed a year ago. Or if you're looking at March to now, you're looking at close to 1.5 years. So it's that period that we're looking for to pay you during the lockdown period. Over to you.
Alan, quite a lot of questions around the fact that the hospitality provider, the hotel, restaurant, etc., has paid their staff in full, but they're wanting to know if they can claim in lieu of the full salaries that they paid their staff. I know what your answer is going to be. We've had people ask if the money can be paid to the employer instead of the employee because they have fronted that money through to the employee so that they get their full salary. What is the status on that?
It's same as always. As I said, TERS we did not start TERS last month or in the beginning of the year. We started TERS in terms of March 2020. The directive is very clear. You can claim back advances or leave income used to pay your employer or pay your employees. If it was an advance and if it was leave income, that is not deemed to be remuneration. Therefore, when we ask employers to complete the spreadsheet or even the direct capturing, we say state remuneration earned during lockdown period, excluding any advances or any leave income or any ex gratia payment. So if it's advance, then it's not deemed to be remuneration. Then the employer can claim that from UIF and offset that against advance. If there's a positive difference, you give the positive difference to the employee. If there's negative difference, then it's between the employer and the employee. The principle never changed. So yes, and that was in play from the 27th of March. Over to you.
errors. Let me just see. I'm just trying to find something. Yeah, so there has to be another way that we can follow up on appeals or escalate appeals, because it gets to the call center. Sometimes it's a hit and miss. And sometimes the call center that they say they can escalate the issue, but it doesn't. It seems to go into a bit of a black hole once it's well escalated, then you can't get any answers out of anyone. There's got to be another way, Alan. There has to be another way. How can we get through call center to escalate these appeals?
Yes, absolutely. I think we mentioned it during the responses. There is an issue, there's a hiccup. On face value, it seems like there's a technical problem in terms of the call center environment. And as he indicated, from the complaints or queries or responses from employers, we are looking at that situation and reviewing that process. Our next meeting in terms of the coordinator of the call center is this week, Friday. As I said, we started the process last week. We had meetings beginning of this week and even today. And the next follow-up meeting in terms of the call center environment will be on Friday at 1 o'clock. And if something positive comes out of it, or there's an alternative process, then we will communicate that to employers during the course of next week. But yes, we are looking at and we're trying to improve, because that is our direct link between the employer and us. The call center is a link between the employer and the UIF, and that's what we must get right. And by Friday, we will have some positive responses to that situation.
Okay.
Over to you.
Wow. Please explain what the advance payment question is on the portal when applying. The two options are: employer has paid advance payments to employees during this period of lockdown, or no payments are made to employees during this period of lockdown. We have paid staff 50% only throughout periods, so which answer would I choose? We have not made advance payment, but we have paid staff. I think you have sort of responded to this already, Alan.
Yes, yeah, it is part of the directive. Advance payment means that you use the funds to pay that individual. No work was done, because if you're looking at remuneration, it is money earned or salaries earned in terms of work done. There was no work done by the individual or the employee, but the employer loaned him, and that is what we call advance. Now, if that's the situation, the employer wants that advance back into the books of the company. So if it goes directly to the employee will have difficulty in terms of reclaiming that portion of the advance. So therefore, we are saying if that was given to the employee, then the payment mode can be paid to employer. When you receive your TAS benefits, then as per regulation, you have the right to deduct that advance, and the difference, if there's a difference, goes to the employee. So that's the purpose of the question. And the reason why we use the word advance, because that is what was stated in the directive, and that's what employers are used to from the 27th of March. Because we are on iteration number 10. That means there are 10 payment period that is attached to the TAS COVID-19.
Alan, a couple
Over
of
to you.
questions. We fall in both Annex A and Annex B. We are a hotel, Annex B, but we are predominantly a conferencing events venue hotel. Events are on Annex A. So where do we claim, Annex A or Annex B? We've got a couple of people who say, do I split it? Do I put it in one claim? Where do I claim, A or B?
I think that option will be, yeah. I think you can split it. That option will be available come Friday. If you can wait till Friday, you will have the provision to apply in terms of both places. That means in terms of Annexure B and thereafter in Annexure A. The key thing is the period that is critical. The period that is open is from 16th March to 25 July. Now, there are certain business establishments that is pure Annexure B. For those business establishments, you can only lodge one iteration period, that is from 28 June to 25 July. If you have a dual function or your dual service to the public in terms of hotels, they have accommodation plus they have events, then you can make two applications. In application Annexure B, you can apply for your full set of employees. In Annexure A, which is a shorter period from 16 March to 27 June, then only for those employees that are affected in terms of events. Now, the key thing is, it is employees that experience a loss of income attached to that establishment or that segment within that establishment. If you have people that are attached to events and only events, they need to be for the entire period broken up into two portions. The first portion is from 16 March to 27 June, and the second portion is from 28 June to 25 July. But if you have certain employees that is only attached to the second segment, then there should only be one claim from 28 June to 25 July. Let me give you an example. In the hotel, there's accommodation. Those employees that are attached to the accommodation segment cannot claim for the events because they are employed to do a particular job that is attached to that portion or that segment of the business. It's very key. It's very key to take into account. And I do understand in certain large hotel groups, they cater for both in terms of events and accommodation. So therefore you have that dual, that establishment performing a dual function. But the key thing is it's not for the employer, it's for the employees that it's attached to that segment, whether the segment is the entire period or the segment is a smaller period of the bigger period.
Okay, so a lot of around this Annexure A, Annexure B, can I claim if I'm in B during the A period? I think, Alan, in the interests of getting as much information to as many people as possible, I would like to unpack this with, again, somebody in your office so that I can get to grips with exactly what this looks like and we can send it out to everybody because there are a lot of questions around it. Alan, a lot of questions around the delay, and I know we started with the delay, but for example, Rashmi's saying, Alan is not addressing why the iteration period for October 2020 to December 2020 is still pending months after the appeal was approved. You must know which companies are still pending payments and when these will be finalized. How can we get information and follow up with whomever? So what happens with something that's, you know, dating back all the way from October through to December and the appeal has been approved?
Yeah, it's a key thing is, do not look at the payment period. Look at the date of your appeal that was approved. That's the first thing. Because the payment period, if you look at 16th October to 31st December, yes, 6 months as elapsed, there's no payment. That is a payment period. But the question is, when did you lodge your claim or when was your appeal approved? If your appeal was approved last week for October period, that means you will lodge your claim today or this week. Then your process will start from this week going forward, and that will be processed when we are doing that month. So it's not the period, it's when you lodge your claim or when your appeal was approved. So that is critical. The second part of it, if something was wrong with your claim, for example, the payment period is 16th October to 31st December, the error message says not declared. And you only correct that error message last week. So don't look at the period, look at when you corrected that error message and the period going forward. So once again, I'm saying it is wrong on face value to talk about the payment period if you don't, in conjunction, talk about when you lodge your claim, when your appeal was approved, or when did you correct the error messages.
Hannah's asked, register cancelled employees for TERS new periods. We were not receiving TERS and then we cancelled TERS. So can employers re-register cancel employees for TERS new periods?
Yes, the first thing is, what is the understanding of cancel? Because we don't cancel a claim, right? If a claim is lodged, we either reject it or approve it for payment. There is no such thing as canceling claim. You cannot go to the portal and cancel the claim. What some employers did, after they received the payment, they refunded the entire amount because it was deemed to be an incorrect or invalid claim. So they refunded the entire amount. It still sits there. So the key question is to say, when you're saying cancel, what process did you follow to cancel it? And from my understanding, there is no cancellation process. So we have to, as I said, unpack that cancellation, because end of the day, the portal is open and still open from 16th October iteration period until 25 July. The prior period is closed, but you can add, you can edit, and you can correct. And if you add, if you edit, if you correct, that will still be in process. Once again, do not look at the payment period and why we did not pay to date. Look at when you lodge a claim, when you did your correction, or when did you rectify error messages, and thereafter count the day, number of days going forward.
Okay. Can we register for UIF after not receiving TERS since 2020 still claim TERS for the new period? So if I didn't register last year, can I register now if I'm in the right sector?
As I said, the portal is still open from 16th October. There's no indication or no communication that says 16th October to 31st December or 1st of January to 15 March 2021 is closed. So if a person today feels that they're entitled to that period and entitled for the right reasons, the system would not block you. The system will block you for periods prior to 15th October, not from 16th October. It's still open.
Okay.
Over to you.
We are two hotels which fall under the same umbrella company, and yet our sister hotel received all their TERS, but we have not. Why? How is this possible? It's not the same, unfortunately. Every different company has different things. I think we've dealt with that. Can employees claim themselves for new dates, or does it have to go through the employer?
It has to go through the employer. That is what the directives indicated, because in terms of number-wise, in terms of logistics, in terms of communication, it's easier to communicate with one person, and then one person can factor whatever is necessary. You take into account from the 27th of March to currently, we processed close to 16 million employees entries, and we paid out close to 15 million. And there is a number we did not pay. That is absolutely correct and is true as per our record show. But the reason for not paying those that we did not pay as an error message. And the only way we can pay or reverse that if the error messages is corrected, or you accept the error messages and feel that no payment is entitled to you.
If a sick appeal is successful, how do we then proceed? Do we receive a specific code, and will this be received by email?
Sorry, I did not get your last question. You broke up. I did not hear the last question. Sorry.
If a sick appeal is successful, how do we then proceed? Do we receive a specific code, and will this be received by email? So what is that process after a sick appeal is successful?
Yes, you will get a communication via your email address that you have on the TERS system. A communication will go out to indicate to you your appeal has been processed. Go back onto the online portal and click on Other Approved Appeals. If you click on Other Approved Appeals and that appeal was successfully loaded onto our system, the system will open you up and you can lodge your claim. Do not click on the other sectors. Click on Other. There is a specific line or heading called Other, and in brackets, Approved Appeals. If you click on that and the system accepts you, that means it was successfully loaded into the system.
Good
Over
question.
to you.
Which medium will be used to send out schedules for payment period? Will it be on the UIF portal or via email?
The payment medium you're talking about, if you're talking about the payment breakdown, that is on the online portal.
No,
In terms of
so when you send the schedules for payment period, that you mentioned you were going to be sending out, will you be sending that out on the UIF portal or via email?
That we can put up on the online portal. So when the person goes on the online portal, then the individual can see in terms of the payment schedule, which payments will be done on which dates. Now on that, I have to communicate with our ICT unit, and in terms of the ICT engineering that processing the payments, what will be done on which date. Now those information we normally communicate with our NetLag social partners, and they always request that information, and we normally give it to them. But I will request the ICT to take it one step further. The payment schedule should also be published on our website or on the online portal in terms, and further to that, we can send it out via the email address or the contact details of the employers. But that I have to communicate with ICT to get the payment schedule.
Okay. Sorry, I'm just trying to not ask the same question over and over. Can I just get confirmation of the actual UIF hotline number? If somebody knows and can please paste it into the chat, because I have a lot of people who say they phoned it, it either wasn't working or they or it just rings essentially. So if anybody has that UIF number, hotline number, please, if you can just put it into the chat for panelists and attendees, because a lot of people are asking about it. Want to find, yeah, a lot of these questions are questions we've already responded to. Does PAYE have to be up to date in order to claim TERS? It wasn't until lockdown started, but must it currently be up to date now? PAYE.
Yeah, in terms of the pay, in terms of anything related to tax, that is not part of our verification. All we want to ensure in terms of verification, through the pay as you earn number as a reference, whether that employee is attached to that employer that's claiming for their TERS. And two, whether that employer has paid the contributions amount attached to that employee. That's the two verifications that we check: employer against employee and contribution paid. And then in terms of SARS, why we use the pay as you earn number? Because SARS do not have UIF reference numbers, because that is not their means of verification or means of filing or means of record purposes. Their system is pay as you earn number. So we attach the pay as you earn number to the UIF number so that the verification process is easier and can be understood by the system in terms of the linkages or logic in terms of the linkages.
If a staff member has paid up until March, why then would they suddenly be rejected if the details are still the same? So it's the same staff member. We're not talking about different companies. Same staff member received their payments up until March. Why would they then be rejected if the details are exactly the same?
Yeah, you got to explain me which March. March last year or March this year? So if the employee is...
Bernie, let me know in the chat, and then we'll just take another question, and we'll then respond to that, Alan, so that we've got all the information. What parameters are you using to approve appeals? If we are only operating at 10% and only about 15% of the staff have received a small salary, no one has received their full salary. Surely this is grounds for approval. I don't know. Are you able to give us some advice there, Alan?
Yes, it's very simple. The starting point is always the directive. The directive indicates in terms of the parameters in terms of going forward. The directive indicate these establishments are entitled to TERS. Let me give you an example. Restaurants. Now, if you're in construction, then whatever you do, whether it's through the appeal process or whether it's your online portal, you'll be rejected because construction is not part of the directive. Now, in terms of restaurant, they say restaurants, yes, you're part of the directives, you were affected more than others, therefore we're giving you the opportunity to claim via TERS. So if you're a restaurant group, then the first in terms of verification is through your SIP codes, the SIP codes that you have with South African Revenue Services. If your SIP codes were correct, and that is key to understand, and I know that we shouldn't blame or label, but some of it, if not all of it, or most of it, were so-called employers' errors. One, they never bothered to have the right zip code at the initial stage. Two, the employers are not declared, so they were poor compliance. Three, with foreign nationals, you got to ensure if you employ the person, there's proper records of verification at Home Affairs to make things easier. So if those things were done in terms of groundwork, then going forward, it will be easier. But let's come back in terms of restaurants. Restaurants, you are allowed to apply for TERS. But what is the key in terms of objective of TERS? It's not to compensate the restaurant, but to compensate the employees. So the question is, yes, restaurant, you can apply, But if the person worked and received 100% of their salary, that person is not entitled to. So you're only looking for those employees that experience a loss of income in terms of the directive. You apply for it because you're trying to compensate for loss of income because there was further restrictions placed on you, especially the restaurant group, or especially the tourism side of it. And if you were affected by that advance or regulation that was strengthened, that was against your establishment, then you can follow the process going forward. Over to you.
The previous question pertained to March 2020. So March 2020 is what he's asked.
Yes. You see, that's the thing we got to take into account. And the dividing line is the AG report. The AG said your controls wasn't good enough. Your controls need to be strengthened. So if you paid you in March 2020, after the AG report, the verification process was strengthened, improved. So when we re-subjected the employees to the advanced verification, the person failed it. So you must take into account, prior to AG, we did bank validation. Post AG, we're doing bank verification. Now it's very simple. We indicated your bank account must equal to your company. When we send the same bank account that you give us, the banking institution must confirm the company is attached to the banking details, the banking details is attached to the company. If it is correct, they gave us a right, go ahead and pay. If it's wrong, they said, no, it's not verified. So how can we be at fault, right? Not paying when the company failed bank verification? Because the same information on the online portal, we're giving it to the banking institution to confirm what they have on the system is 100%, because we couldn't place onus on what was captured, and we couldn't place onus in the documentation. Any documentation can be reproduced fraudulently. Any information on the online portal could be captured incorrectly or fraudulently. So therefore, all information on the front-end portal is subject to verification. So if it fails verification, then we did as per the business rules, and we're giving you an outcome. The outcome is a rejection code. Absorb the rejection code, dissect the rejection code, and ask yourself what I can do to correct it. Having said that, I do understand what you're trying to say in terms of bottlenecks in the call center environment, which we should correct, improve it, make it more streamlined and user-friendly, both on the employer side, both in the call center agent, and also in line in terms of turnaround with positive responses.
Sure.
Over to you.
Bottlenecks, I think, yeah, there's more than bottlenecks. But anyway, what happens if your TERS application is pending payment, so not technically rejected? Are you able to open a UIF claim? I want you to talk a little bit about double dipping here, Alan, because I have people asking about maternity benefits and can they claim for TERS at the same time as the maternity benefit. So if I'm waiting for my TERS application payment, but it's not technically rejected, am I able to at the same time open a UIF claim?
You see, the system will pick up. There's a claim lying on TERS. The key thing is you applied for TERS, right? You applied for TERS and you gave a period. You meaning the employer. And the female contributor should know that the female contributor was pregnant. And the choice is whether I want to apply for TERS or whether I want to apply for maternity. So why would a person apply for both? That is double dipping, right? Yes, if it's outside the period, and the claim is outside the period, it wouldn't make a difference. But you're lodging an application when your employer made an application for TERS. If it's pending, it can be paid out at a later stage. So you are complicating the process. Therefore, I said you got to think back in terms of, yes, the root cause of it, right? And whether the root cause is that or the root cause is that. So the question is, you are lodging the claim, not me, right? And then when the periods overlap, then you're asking me, why are you blocking my maternity? But at the same time, you lodge your TERS. That is double dipping. Apply for one or the other. Your date of application of your maternity should be after your TERS period. So there's no overlap. Your payment period should be after your TERS period. So there's no overlapping, because one of the flaws that was an AG report that we paid people that were dead, TERS, or a person that was working for government or in prison and TERS. Yes, it wasn't large numbers, but it was flow in our system. So now when we strengthen the system, then the problem is a TERS claim is coming with a maternity claim. Your date of application should be after TERS, and your date of payment period should be after TERS, then it shouldn't be a problem. Then there's no double dipping. Over to you.
If a payment is pending with no clarification, do we need to lodge an appeal?
If a claim is lodged and it's in the system, why lodge an appeal? Appeal is, as I indicated, the system is not taking your business establishment as per the directive because your zip codes is incorrect, or there's some error is lying somewhere that is not allowing you to apply in terms of your sector codes. Then you lodge an appeal.
Actually, sorry, Alan, to interrupt you. The question is, if a payment is pending with no clarification, so there's no issue, there's no glitch, payment is pending and it's not coming through, do they need to lodge an appeal?
Therefore, I said, we have to get the right terminology without confusing things. Appeal is that you are denied entry into the portal because of your subcodes. Then you lodge an appeal and you attach your supporting documentation, and your supporting documentation must prove that you linked that establishment. Then we say appeal approved, give you a communication, you go back to the front end portal, you click other approved claims and you lodge a claim. Yeah, you're saying your claim is a lodge. So the question is, should you lodge a dispute that we're not paying you? Now the question is, if everything is correct, there's no error messages, there could be only two reasons why your claim is not processed. One, failed bank verification. Two, is that there is a hold on your claim because it's under a risk block or one or other blocks, whether it's a follow the money block or whether UIF block is being monitored or is being investigated or is being reviewed. That's only two reasons. So go into the portal. If your bank verification is passed and is pending and is not being processed, it could be one of those blocks. That's the only time where you have no error messages in terms of your claim and no payment is because of the two incidents. Over to you.
Got my appeal approved on the 12th of July, uploaded all the relevant documentation on the portal for the 2 periods, and then 10 days after submission submitted, I got an email to say that UIF had not reached my appeal form, and now that's where I sit and cannot get any further feedback out of the call center. Any ideas?
Yeah, you see, you got to take into account in terms of the question. My appeal was approved, I lodged my claim. If you launch your claim, you can see it under saved employees. So the last message doesn't make sense, because if you have a negative outcome of your appeal process, then you would not be allowed to lodge your appeal. That question indicated to me that my appeal was lodged on the 12th of July. That's the question. So the next part of it, it's there on the system. The next question, why it is not being processed? If it's not being processed, there must be an error message or a reason for it. And once we know the reason, then we can have a solution to correct it. But not, you already lodged your claim. That's the key thing I'm picking up. The claim has been lodged.
When you have to upload bank confirmation, what must we upload, as they are now wanting to pay directly to employees? Would it be the employee's bank letter? It wouldn't be the employer's bank letter, surely.
No, for employees, we do not ask to load any source documentation because the employee's bank account is subject to bank verification. With employee's bank verification, we can match the banking details to the ID number. We can match the banking details to the surname. We can match the banking details to the initials of the individual. So that is automated. We're not going to ask for documentation that will clog the system. Bank verification will take care of that. And if we ask for some kind of documentation, what are we going to do with it? Because we're not going to sit and look at 16 million forms. We don't have the capacity to do that. Therefore, we went to the bank verification. This is only in the case of employer that we have asked for the bank confirmation letter to strengthen if the bank verification was a problem in terms of going forward. But once again, for employees, there is no source document to attach. Over to you.
How can we reset our youth filing profile? If call center is not able to assist, is there another number or center that is able to assist if one needs to reset their youth filing profile?
Yes. Now with youth filing, it's an old system. It's an old system. You're not talking about TERS. TERS only started in terms of 18 months ago. Youth filing is an old system. It's been used by employers for decades or years going back. Now, that system was being managed not only by head office, by provinces. So they have youth filing champions or youth filing staff that can unblock any youth filing issues and give you answers to youth filing processes. We only use the youth filing process to assist us in terms of the declarations or in terms of foreign declarations. But the system was there for a number of years, and every provincial office will be able to assist you with any youth filing issues. Over to you.
Okay. What is going on with the discrepancy function? It has been in progress since last year. Please advise.
Yes, in terms of the discrepancy is that you're looking at where it was paid, but you felt that there's an entry made by yourself is incorrect and you want to correct it and the possibility of an underpayment. Now, once the discrepancy is loaded, then it's extracted, goes to the backend and is processed and paid if it meets all the rules. Once again, discrepancy will fall under payments, will fall under the schedule. You cannot do discrepancy every day. You cannot do discrepancy every week. And discrepancy is, I wouldn't say the normal payment, but is an offset of the payment in terms of a smaller correction here and there, in terms of underpayments, in some cases lead to overpayment. Once again, within that payment schedule, we also have to indicate in terms of the discrepancy when it will be executed in terms of payment. So as I said, when you're looking at payments, you're looking at about 20 or 30 payment runs to be done, and all can't be done in a day or week. You're looking at the 10 iteration periods. The 10 iteration periods is separated into pay to employer, pay to bargaining council, pay to employees. Then you're looking at the discrepancy part of it in terms of each period, each month. So the number of actions to be done in terms of, in the beginning of TERS, it was easier. Payments were faster, it was regular because you were only looking at 3 months or 3 iteration period. Now you're looking at 10 iteration period divided by pay to employer, pay to employee, and bargaining council. Then you're looking at bank verification, the manual bank verification, and the automated bank verification, and you're looking in terms of foreign nationals, which is a separate runs, and you're looking at discrepancies. So definitely there is a sequence of events and everything doesn't take place weekly or daily.
Where can we get the official formula that the Department of Labour uses on their TERS platform so we can scrutinize the actual payments and what should have been paid, both over and under payments? The online DOL web platform is not conclusive and contradictory.
Okay. Now, once again, if people have the correct addresses or contact details, then they will get the information. See, we've got to look at it in terms of what they're receiving and how they're receiving. The payment calculator or the formula to pay was distributed 2 weeks ago again to every employer on the TERS portal, right? And that information should be at the disposal for the employer or the representative employer. And it's stated because we emailed a document called the policy interpretation document. And the reason for doing that is that out there, members of the public was having problems in terms of interpreting what the directive indicated. So we took the directive, we interpreted the directive for the employers out there and put it on a policy interpretation document. And the same email communication, we also attached another letter explaining the follow the money process. So therefore I said communication is going out, but either employers are not getting it or they're not reading it correctly or not reading it when they receive it.
Okay, we are at 1:30 and we have 400 questions in total, Alan, that we have not got through. This is clearly a problem. If I can please just have
Natalia, what we can do, with your permission, I'm not sure what the process is, but we can do a follow-up next week. You can confirm the date and time with me and we can do a follow-up. As I said, if it's not an issue, I don't know the process. And alternatively, yes, you and I can set a time and day that we can do maybe a one-on-one telephone conference, and some of the questions I can re-explain in greater detail, and that will allow you also in terms of follow-up and dissecting whatever responses are giving. So either we can follow two approaches. You and I have a telephone conference one-on-one. Alternatively, we can have a follow-up.
Chief, is that okay with you?
Yeah. No, thank you, Alan. We can definitely have a follow-up. The issue of UIF and the pain that the industry is going through, it is real. You see it every day, and we definitely need to do this. We'll set up some time with you next week where we can have a follow-up. We can go through all these questions to make sure that everyone is on the same page. But before we close, I think one of the things that came out strongly is the issue of the telephone number not working. I have tried to call it when we were doing this session. I had to try to call about 4 to 5 times until I could go through. At first, just you don't even go anywhere. So it's one thing that needs to be sorted out. The speed in which the agents needs to respond. Again, I held for quite a number of minutes until I hang up. I think that needs to be addressed. The quality of responses that is being sent out to the businesses needs to also be quality, to make sure that people get the resolutions that they seek. And I think that and Alan, this may not even be in your area, but it belongs to the senior management at UIF, of which I will raise when I go to NEDLEC, to make sure that you do get the assistance that you need, to make sure that there is enough people to answer this question and the answers are correct and people are able to sort this situation out. So that's on the call center side. You did promise that you're going to put out the payment schedule, meaning we will know when the payments runs are going to be for which iteration. So we look forward to that. The issue around Schedule A or B, I saw a lot of people still confused whether they belong to Schedule A or Schedule B. Let's look at it this way. If you're a travel agent or a tour operator, a shuttle company, or any other company that's not mentioned on Schedule A, and if you support the events industry, you are allowed to apply. You just have to prove that you do support the events industry. There are many travel agents who organize events for government, who organize events for corporates, and many others along the value chain. You are allowed to apply on Annexure A. Annexure B, you are also allowed to apply on Annexure B. So what's going to happen is that there will be an opening for Annexure A that will say those that are in the events and so forth and so on, and the value chain of events and exhibition and so forth and so on will then there will be a separate application. And those that were restricted, including the events, in these 4 weeks of lockdown, there will be on Annexure B. So the reason why we did this, why we had more for the events, is that on the regulations, you always had events being limited. And our discussion at NEDLEC was to say we need to have a relief for those that are in events and related sector, because they've always been restricted. So they need to get a relief from the past opening or the last time the reiteration was there up to now. So in essence, you have that open, you're a travel agent, Annexure A, and you believe that you help in events and you're a shuttle company, you can apply. You should be able to get approval. There may be a process of appeal that we need to go through. You can still also apply for Annexure B which is pertaining to the lockdown level that has just ended, you should be able to still get approved. We will still have further negotiations and talks based on the restrictions that we have. Alan and myself, we have the NETLEC, there's a NETLEC UIF work stream, which there are other people that participate. We'll still have that discussion going forward to make sure that we discuss, and if there's money available, how do we access that money, and how do we make sure that it's available to the industry. But we will have a follow-up session. We will make sure that we keep on this and we discuss this as much as we can. And also there are answers to the many questions that you have. We are not going to rest until every person who qualifies to get the UIF TERS money gets the money. If we have to do this every other week, we will do so. We are not going to stop. And everyone who qualifies and that are supposed to get this money will get this money. That's what we discussed when we were at NETLEC. That's what we agree with the labor, with community, and of course with government. So we're not going to stop. This is going to be, if we need to do the service of these until each one of your employees gets what's due to them, we will continue to do so. So thank you very much, Alan. Thank you, Natalia, for always facilitating these discussions and making sure that the questions are grouped and they're pulled together, and we try to answer as many as possible. We will continue with this. In the meanwhile, do work with your with your associations. Make sure that your association gets the issues that you're having. We'll still be processing those. As much as when I receive them, I send them to Alan and the team, and we are able to get some sort of answers back and make sure that you can go back and rectify the errors that may be there. So thank you very much for everyone attending. Thank you, Alan. Thank you, Natalia. And I think this has been a relief to some, still more questions from others.
Thanks, Chief.
Thank you. It's a pleasure from my side.
Cheers, guys. See you soon.